And mowed the grass literally right underneath where we're standing, so that's a little bit bizarre. Well, things are a bit different today, and I want to talk to you about a technology that I've been working on which I think is going to have a dramatic change to the world. Cars that drive themselves, and they change transportation, but so much more than transportation. I'm going to cover for you 5 different pillars of society I think will be changed dramatically by this. Now, the most important is saving lives, but there are actually huge effects from energy to our cities and how we do parking and manage our land, to congestion, and also to retailing and delivery and all the other aspects of what a city is like. Now, saving lives should be enough to understand a technology like this, because we see 1.2 million people around the world die every year because humans are not very good drivers. They cause huge amounts of accidents, and they kill not just those millions of people, but injure far more. In the United States, the National Highway Transportation Safety Agency worked out a cost for accidents of $230 billion. Now, if you work that out per mile, it's about 8 cents a mile, which is about the same price as the gasoline in a Prius. And in California, you're legally required to drive the Prius. But think about that. Paying more for your share of the cost of accidents than you're paying for your gasoline in a car like that. Also, that country drives every year 50 billion hours doing this. The whole country only works 240 billion hours. In Canada, they do a little better. 2,000 Canadians, though, killed every year on the roads, 150,000 injured. And that's just a little bit less, actually, than the United States on a per-kilometer basis. So we can't get too smug here. Now, 40% of those accidents come from drinking. And one thing that's nice about robots is they very rarely drink. 80% of those accidents come from inattention, and actually that's also something computers are pretty good at doing. They don't not look. They have this unblinking stare, which we don't like when it's the NSA, but we like it when it's a car that's driving for us. We lose a lot of our lives to congestion, and we've given over huge amounts of our city. Now, LA is not the poster child, but more than half the land in Los Angeles belongs to the car. It's driveways and garages and parking lots and streets. 25% of the entire energy budget of rich countries like the US and Canada goes to personal transportation, and about 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Here's my favorite statistic. As a planet, every year we are driving 1.7 light years. Now, how often do you get to use light years in your work if you're not an astronomer? So let's take a look at the reality, why this is not science fiction, why this is happening. This is, as they like to say in Silicon Valley, garage innovation, finally taking place in garages. But this is not AI of the sort that has to be as smart as a human. It's more like being as smart as a horse, or even being as smart as a bug, something that we can achieve. So 10 years ago, the American military held a series of contests to build the first generation of self-driving cars. And the first contest was a complete failure. Nobody got more than about 7 kilometers. My friend Anthony entered a motorcycle, which he forgot to turn on at the beginning. But the second contest had 5 cars complete a 150-mile course through the California desert. Cars that were empty, going down desert roads and windy mountain ravines, all without much money at all, because the prize was only $2 million and the teams didn't spend that much. Well, Google was smart, and they hired the team that won this contest from Stanford, and they hired the people that won the contest after it to produce the next generation of vehicle. Here you'll actually see Chris Urmson, the chief engineer of the Google project, pushing the button on the car. Chris is Canadian, by the way, so we're everywhere. And here's a car driving, as it has done now for over 700,000 miles on urban streets and highways in California, stopping at lights, making left turns, avoiding pedestrians. Google has thanked these people for participating in its research. Seeing very differently from a human being, in all directions, 360 degrees all the time. Not the way a human sees, not the way a human drives. So in that course, they've gone down the streets of busy urban centers like San Francisco and dealing with left turns, dealing with joggers and stop signs and things like that. Running down through the toll gates here on the Golden Gate Bridge, which I'm sure some of you have done. Going down the entire coast of California. Here you see the pretty town of Monterey. Driving along windy mountain roads, dealing with things things that scare even human drivers as they're coming along. Seeing the same night or day, which is actually pretty handy sometimes. Going down even, this is a little tourist attraction, the windiest street in the world called Lombard Street. This is sped up a bit. I don't actually recommend Lombard Street at this speed, but it's an example of what you can do. They've also done hard problems like merging onto a busy freeway. At Stanford, they actually taught their car to park in a way I don't recommend that you park. You can buy today a remarkable amount of stuff. You can buy cars that will park themselves, keep themselves in the lane, keep themselves a fixed distance from the car in front of them, see if you're going to hit a pedestrian or another car, hit the brakes for you. That's all in the showrooms today. But all the car companies have announcements of what they're doing. Audi's been showing their car driving in the highways of Las Vegas at CES. Tesla, after Google announced that they would have a car out probably in 2017, Tesla, because Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, has the largest testicles in Silicon Valley, announced they would have a car in 2016. Volvo has done a project where they have 100 cars in Gothenburg, and they've also built a convoy project where people can follow a truck down the road. Nissan has opened a lab across the highway from us, across the runway from us, and they have promised they will be selling cars in 2020 that can drive themselves. Daimler, Mercedes, has a car you can buy today, the 2014 S-Class, which will drive itself in a traffic jam, and they have also said they will sell full self-driving cars in 2020. BMW has a very good project going out. Ford has just started up a project with their vehicles. This company in France called Induct is actually selling this vehicle today. It has no steering wheel, and it is meant to be a shuttle on campuses, so it can move people from place to place, summoned by a cell phone on campuses. Not a science fiction future product. This is something they are selling today. This is a video, let's get the audio up, of Google's car in action.
Here we go. Away we go. Look, Ma, no hands. No hands anywhere. No hands, no feet. No hands, no feet. No nothing.
So this is the first civilian to use the car.
Yep. The car's using the radars and laser to check and make sure there's nothing coming either way. I find myself looking. Old habits die hard, man. They don't die. Right, well, let's go get a talk about the drive-thru. And we're turning into the parking lot. How neat. There we go. Now we kind of creep along here. Does anybody have any money? I've got money. No, I've got my wallet right here. %of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind.
So as you can see, not just the able-bodied people have something to gain from this. There are millions of people who have disabilities that stop giving them the freedom of transportation that we take for granted. And when I refer to those people, I mean all of you when you get older. You will lose these abilities as well, and this technology will stop you from losing your freedom of transportation. Here's a video that was just released actually a couple weeks ago about Google's project working in urban situations. Here you can see it, for example, detecting traffic cones in a construction zone and avoiding them. You can also see it detecting a bicyclist making a hand signal in order to turn left and move in front of the vehicle, and sees the hand go out, sees the bicyclist go out. The bicyclist is a wimp and decides to abort their particular trip. So this is advancing quite a bit, and the number of miles of real driving is increasing. So how does this work? Why is this a way for programmers to save the world? I'll very briefly touch on the technology. On top of the car you saw a spinning sensor. This is a research device that is currently getting much smaller and cheaper. But every 10 times a second it is sending out laser beams that scan the world, and it works like a radar except with light. And so you get this 360-degree picture of the world in all directions in full 3D, not the fake 3D you do with your own eyes. And this gives the vehicle the ability to see all obstacles and make sure it's not going to hit anything, and that's kind of the goal. Now, there are other sensors. There's radar, which is able to see how fast things are going and see through fog, which is nice. There is a GPS in the car, but the GPS is not used to drive. Any of you who've tried to drive from the GPS would know why. It's just good to know what street you're on, not exactly where you are. The other sensors do that job. So imagine a world a little bit more in the future where it's not a little Prius coming up to you, but a vehicle designed for travel. You pick up your cell phone, you say you want to travel somewhere, and within a minute something pulls up to you, and it's It's a vehicle which has a desk or a screen or other features which allow you to actually work or play or live your life. So it's like being teleported because it doesn't take time out of your day. All happening without central control, all happening without new infrastructure, which is very interesting. This has several consequences. Driving you around is just one of them. It turns out vehicles that can move on their own, that can move empty, are also vehicles that can deliver themselves, they're vehicles that can refuel and recharge themselves, and they're vehicles that can park and store themselves. Now this actually has huge consequences for energy and the car industry. And the reason is that today, when people go to buy a car, they ask one question in the showroom. What car do I need for my life? They want a car. If they ski three times a year, they get this big SUV. If they move cargo twice a year, they buy one of the #1 selling cars in our society, the F-150 pickup. But let's change this around. When you're summoning a car on demand, you ask a very different question than what car do I need for my life, and you don't have to buy this multi-purpose vehicle that does everything you want it to do. You ask, what car do I need today? What car do I need for this trip? And the answer to that is remarkably different, because most trips are actually you alone, and you're just going across town. That's actually most of the travel you do in that big 5-passenger sedan that you came here in today. And that makes a huge difference for how much energy we use for transportation. So much so, in fact, that we could reduce the amount of fuel that's used, the amount of CO2 aroused by huge amounts. The United States would no longer need to import oil from overseas. It would still have to buy from Canada, so you can rest a little easier. But the United States has this pesky habit of going to war over the oil it needs from overseas. You've probably seen that. It's a very bad habit, and they should be broken of it. And the idea that software can do that is quite remarkable. Cars, or robots at least, don't care how convenient it is to refuel or recharge. And that allows you to use all these alternative fuels which face this barrier, because people can't tolerate the idea that they might have to take a long recharge or might have to drive a long distance to get an alternate fuel. So, this also has interesting policy consequences. At first, when I started giving these talks, I went around saying, we don't know if the governments are going to legalize this. It could be decades before they get around. The reverse has actually happened. 4 states and the District of Columbia in the United States have actually passed laws to enable the technology. This is the first Nevada license plate for such vehicles. We're going to see competition between countries that want to be the center of this new auto industry. Singapore, China, India, Israel, they will all compete and try and lead this way. The United States governments are actually waking up in advance, which surprises me. And we're going to see lots of lobbying. We're going to see people with children who don't want to drive them to practice all the time. We're going to see drunk people who want to get wasted and be able to get home easily without worrying about a DUI. And of course, Jews love this vehicle because there's nothing Jews enjoy more than arguing about whether it's legal to ride in a car like this on Saturday or not. Nothing is perfect, though. This world might result in the Wall-E world, where we don't walk anymore to places. That could be a bad sign. And it doesn't have to be green. Instead of a tiny little vehicle that's very efficient, you could ask for an RV to follow you everywhere you go. In fact, why should you have only one RV? Why not have 6 RVs follow you everywhere you go and dock and form a house in the parking lot? You could do it. It's not particularly green, but it's possible, and so you have to worry about how people will abuse everything. And let's face it, the military started this, and they have other plans, non-civilian plans for this technology that we should worry about. We also have to worry about how it's going to change our cities. It might increase our sprawl or get rid of it. It's a very difficult thing to predict. We also have to worry about the consequences to our freedom. If you remember the movie Minority Report, Tom Cruise is riding around in a car like this. This movie pretends it's about psychics predicting the future, but it's really about cars that drive themselves, of course. And in this movie, his car is driving along, and the car says, you have a new destination. The new destination is the jail. Well, the police would like a car that does that and betrays you and takes you to jail, but you might not like that. And there are barriers to this becoming possible. I mean, there is a fear that people have. For whatever reason, people don't like being killed by robots. And they'd rather be killed by drunks, which is what's happening today. But that's a choice we'll actually have to make as society, whether or not we let cars have accidents, because nothing will be perfect and they will have accidents. And these cars will hurt people, but they'll hurt fewer people than the driving that we're doing today is doing. And we as a society will have to get over our fear of the machine if we want this to happen. There are other people who could get in the way, a profession in the lower left-hand corner, I won't name them, as well as, of course, the fact that there is programming that needs to be done. But let me tell you why I get really excited. Because this brings that curve of Moore's law that Salim showed you, that constantly increasing, doubling exponential curve, to transportation. The computer becomes the most important part of the car, not the engine, not the looks. The system that drives it will be the most important part of the car. And because of that, that important part, that's on the Moore's Law curve. That's the thing that's getting better at the rate that software and networks and computers have been getting better, while the rest of the car stays the same. We will have transportation and innovation that's bought by early adopters. Now, early adopters are stupid people with too much money, basically. They will go out and buy the 5S of something just a few months after they bought the 5 under contract. I see some people in the room who've done it. But they're wonderful people because they buy these new technologies, perhaps irrationally, and get them into the market and fund the innovation and development of these technologies. Compare that to how we've done transportation in the past with municipal administrators. I apologize to the municipal administrators in the room. You're lovely people. But you're not early adopters. You can't. It's not the way your job works. It's not how you're paid to do it. So technologies that are sold from the bottom up with innovation and early adoption compared to technologies that are designed from the top down, there's no contest in my mind if you want to know which one to bet on. Now, the question we should ask ourselves, though, is, will this technology get adopted at the speed that old industrial technologies got adopted? You know, like electric cars, which are actually 100 years old? Or will it be adopted at the speed we've seen for things like smartphones, like the iPhone, where it appears and suddenly the people in Waterloo are completely ignoring it and it takes over their marketplace in a few years? I'm sorry, I went to school with those guys at REM. They're great guys, but they missed this. And this can come on so quickly. It can surprise you in amazing ways. I believe it's going to be closer to the iPhone than it was to the electric car. Now, this is a very important question for Ontario. And the reason is that I think that when you have disruptive technology like this, the old players rarely survive the shift to the new style of technology. And the big companies, the Fords and GMs, even the Toyotas, even the Mercedes-Benz, which is currently the leading car company in this area, these companies may not survive to the next round, which means we may see the auto industry go away as it existed today. Now, that's a big part of the Ontario economy. However, Ontario has a big advantage over Michigan, which I think Michigan is doomed. So sorry, Michigan. Ontario has a chance because Ontario is a high-tech sector too. You can recruit top people to come and work in Toronto. You can't do that to do in Detroit. But this is going to take a real serious effort if Ontario wants to maintain the part of its economy that has come from automotive in the past. That's a new thing they added to the Ford building, that little sign there saying they're no relation to someone else named Ford. Now, these vehicles, as I mentioned, they don't have to park. They actually can do what's legally called standing, which means that they can move out of the way if they're in front of a fire hydrant or a driveway. And what that means is we don't need all these parking lots that we have built. We actually have enough capacity to store the smaller number of cars we'll have when they're in taxi mode, dropping you off and picking someone else. And with that capacity, we can actually reclaim huge amounts of land in our cities. My dream is that occasionally we'll turn parking lots into parkland. I know mostly they'll be turned into office complexes and new roads, but occasionally this will happen. That will be nice. It's a bonanza, actually, for our cities to see that much land suddenly become available. The most important element of real estate, as everyone knows, is location, location, and location. And that means that we're going to see a giant change in the value of real estate as location becomes different. We also have the ability to reduce the amount of traffic we spend our time in. I don't have time to cover that in great detail. But I will tell you one thing. In our society, today we have one vital product so important, so vital to our lives that you must be able to get it no matter where you are in 30 minutes or less. What if you can get anything in 30 minutes, not just a pizza? What if you have delivery robots that can bring you anything for a few cents a kilometer? What does that mean for retailing? Walmart has destroyed small retailers. Now Walmart will fall prey to online retailers like Amazon that can get you everything you want in a very short amount of time. So the way cities are designed for retailing is also going to change. I believe that the time is now for a resolve that kind of parallels Apollo, and that this nation should commit itself, before this decade is out, to a computer driving a man to lunch at noon and returning him safely to work. Okay, not a great, well. But John F. Kennedy said something else about the moon launch. He said that some projects are worth doing not just because they're easy, but because they're hard. And this is one of those projects which is hard but not intractable, but has this ability to have an immense change on our society, which is why I'm working on it and why other people are working on it as well. So I think we're going to see a remarkable change to transportation, the very core of what cities are, and thus we'll see a big change to cities as well. So thank you very much.